I swear, Lauren, Jacob hissed, narrowing his eyes at me. Challenge me one more time, and I'll make sure you're left with nothing. I felt the sting of his words, but I kept my face impassive, refusing to show how much they hurt. This was my life now, constantly walking on eggshells around Jacob, my controlling husband. "What's for dinner, Lauren?" Jacob asked as he entered the kitchen, tossing his jacket on a chair. "I made spaghetti. Your favorite?" I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Jacob stepped closer, peering into the pot. "And yet, somehow, you've managed to mess up even that." "Disappointing, as usual," he sneered. I grit my teeth and took a deep breath, focusing on the steam rising from the pot instead of his sharp words. I couldn't afford to react. Not yet. Jacob leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. "You know, if you spent less time daydreaming and more time paying attention, maybe you'd get it right for once." I kept my head down, setting the table in silence. He thrived on his control, on making me feel lesser. But each petty insult, each commanding demand only fueled my resolve. A knock at the door broke the tense silence. "I'm not expecting anyone," I said quietly. "Just answer it," Jacob barked, irritation clear in his tone. I opened the door to find our neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, holding a small basket of freshly baked cookies. "Hi, Lauren. I thought you might enjoy these," she said with a warm smile. "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. That's very kind," I replied, grateful for the brief reprieve. Jacob's voice sliced through the moment. "Lauren, can you please hurry up? We don't have all night." I quickly thanked Mrs. Thompson again and shut the door. I could feel Jacob's eyes on me as I placed the cookies on the counter. "Next time, tell your little friends to buzz off when we're having dinner," Jacob said, his annoyance palpable. I didn't respond. Any retort would only escalate things. Instead, I served the spaghetti and sat across from him, my appetite non-existent. Jacob dug into his plate, then paused, making a face. "This tastes like it's been sitting out. What were you doing all day?" "Cleaning, laundry," I began, but he cut me off. "Excuses," he muttered. The evening dragged on with his constant criticisms and complaints. As I did the dishes later, I thought about all the moments that led me here. The charming man I met years ago was long gone, replaced by this controlling figure. I tucked those memories of better days away and focused on the present. I needed a plan, a way out of this suffocating life. As Jacob eventually retreated to his study, I took a deep breath, feeling a small flicker of determination spark inside me. The insults about the spaghetti, the constant belittling, it was all pushing me to a breaking point. In the quiet of the kitchen, I whispered to myself, "This isn't over, Jacob. Not by a long shot." I stared at the calendar on the fridge, each day marked with mundane chores. My life had become a monotonous cycle. Jacob had done a fine job convincing me to leave behind my career in digital marketing when we first got married. His charm was irresistible back then. I could hardly believe the person he has become. I thought back to the days with my father. He was my biggest supporter, always encouraging me to aim higher. Losing him had been like losing my compass. That was when Jacob entered my life, a comforting presence during the most turbulent time. His charm masked the controlling monster he would later become. "Lauren, where's my blue tie?" Jacob hollered from the bedroom, breaking my train of thought. "In the closet, where it always is," I called back, suppressing the irritation in my voice. Jacob stormed into the living room, tie in hand, glaring at me. "If you'd keep things organized, I wouldn't have to waste time looking for stuff. It's like you don't even care." I gripped the edge of the counter, my knuckles turning white. "It's right where it's supposed to be, Jacob. Maybe if you stopped leaving stuff everywhere, you'd know that." He stepped closer, anger flashing in his eyes. "Don't get smart with me, Lauren. Just because you sit at home all day doesn't mean you understand real stress." The bitterness rose in my throat, but I stayed silent, letting him think he'd won another round. Each word he threw at me was another brick in the wall I was building inside, a wall he wouldn't be able to climb. As Jacob left for work, I sank into the kitchen chair, exhaustion washing over me. I remembered my first meeting with him. He was so attentive, so supportive. Back then, he admired my drive and ambition, or so I thought. One evening, over dinner, his charm was in full display. "You're incredible at what you do, Lauren, but wouldn't it be nice if you didn't have to deal with the constant pressure?" His words were like honey, and in my vulnerable state, they sounded logical. Giving up my job seemed like a relief at the time, a chance to start a family and focus on us. But us had quickly become him, and his support turned into demands. Slowly, he wore me down until I felt like a shadow of who I used to be. But shadows could shift and change, and I was ready for a transformation. The phone rang, pulling me back to the present. It was Julie, my old friend. "Hey, Lauren, just checking in. How are things?" I glanced at Jacob's empty study, his presence still weighing heavily in the air. "Surviving, but I'm getting there," I replied. "You deserve better, you know that, right?" Julie's words were a balm to my aching spirit. "Yeah," I whispered, "I do." After hanging up, I knew what I had to do. I dusted off my old digital marketing textbooks and fired up my laptop. It was time to reconnect with the person I used to be, the person my father believed in. Jacob might have broken my spirit, but he hadn't destroyed it, and he was going to see just how resilient I could be. Jacob's late-night arrivals were becoming a regular occurrence. The digital clock blinked 11:45 p.m. as I sat on the couch, listening to the front door creak open. He stumbled in, reeking of alcohol and some unfamiliar perfume. Every night he came back later, providing me with weaker excuses. "Lauren," he slurred, dropping his keys on the floor. "Late meeting. Again." I bit back my reply, watching him struggle to remove his shoes. "You've been working a lot of late nights lately," I said instead, trying to keep my tone even. Jacob shrugged, eyes glazed. "Networking is important. You wouldn't understand being cooped up here all day." "Networking at a bar?" I asked, unable to keep the sarcasm out of my voice. His expression turned dark. "Why are you questioning me? Do you want to add to my stress?" "No, Jacob, I'm just trying to understand," I replied, my voice cold. He laughed bitterly. "You understand? Stick to your domestic duties, Lauren." I walked back to the bedroom, anger simmering beneath the surface. I needed proof of his lies. Quietly lowering myself at his study desk, I opened his laptop, the password guessed on the second try. Emails and messages flooded the screen. His inbox was filled with vague business trip plans and correspondences with someone named Emma. One email caught my eye. The subject line read, "Last weekend was amazing, Emma." I clicked it open, my heart pounding. The email contained photos of Jacob and Emma, smiling and cozying up to each other at some resort. Rage boiled within me, but I kept my breathing steady. This was the confirmation I needed, and I quickly took screenshots and saved them to a flash drive. The next morning, Jacob shuffled into the kitchen, his usual arrogance in place. I forced myself to act normal, setting his coffee on the counter. "Going on another trip soon?" I asked, casually. "Yeah, another business thing," Jacob replied, not even looking at me. "Why, planning a party while I'm gone?" I forced a laugh. "Of course not, just curious." "Well, curiosity killed the cat, Lauren. Stick to what you do best, managing the house," he replied with a smirk. After he left for work, I pulled out the flash drive and made copies of everything. By evening, the ache in my heart had turned to resolve. I began contacting lawyers and started planning my escape. Jacob wasn't going to see this coming. Jacob came home late again, almost midnight. "Had a productive day?" he sneered, hanging his jacket on the chair. "Yes," I replied, a small smile playing on my lips. "Very productive." He narrowed his eyes, but didn't push further, preoccupied with his own thoughts. As he made his way to bed, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The evidence was secure, my plan in motion. Jacob's reign of control was nearing its end, and soon he'd learn just how much one underestimated housewife could do. "Good night, Jacob," I whispered, a hint of satisfaction in my voice. "Sleep well." Jacob's departure for another so-called business trip felt different this time. His usual casual arrogance was replaced by an uneasy glance in my direction. Maybe he sensed the change. Maybe he felt my quiet defiance growing louder inside my heart. As soon as his car pulled out of the driveway, I went to his study and started scanning through his things again. In his top drawer, there it was, another photo. This one was intimate, more personal, showing him and Emma at a beach, laughing, her head resting on his shoulder. The sight made my chest tighten, but I swiftly composed myself. I took a picture of it with my phone and tucked everything back neatly. Later that afternoon, I began gathering more evidence from his computer. Emails, photos, reservations, each piece creating a picture of his betrayal. My eyes narrowed on one email thread where Emma wrote, "Can't wait to see you again this weekend." My fingers tapped quickly to take screenshots and save them all. I picked up my phone and dialed Julie's number. "Hey, can we meet up?" I asked. "Of course, Lauren. Is everything okay?" she replied, concern evident in her voice. "Not really, but I'm working on it," I responded. We met at a small cafe downtown, the kind of place Jacob would never set foot in. Julie gave me a hug and sat down. "Talk to me," she said, her eyes empathetic. I handed her the printed emails and photos. "Jacob is having an affair. I need to gather enough evidence to confront him and to make sure he can't wiggle out of a divorce unscathed." Julie's eyes widened as she looked through the documents. "Lauren, this is deplorable, but you're brave for doing this." "I don't feel brave, Julie. I just feel determined," I said, sipping my coffee. "You should, Lauren, and you know I'm here for whatever you need." "Thanks. I might need a lawyer soon," I said, giving her a half-hearted smile. By Sunday, Jacob was back, acting as if everything was normal. I maintained the facade, biding my time. The next evening, as he was about to settle into his usual post-dinner routine in front of the TV, I noticed a message notification pop up on his phone. It read, "Miss you already. Last weekend was perfect, Emma." I glanced at Jacob, who was now engrossed in his show. My jaw tightened, but I swallowed the anger. Patience. I needed more patience. I carefully noted the content and continued my silent gathering of evidence. I logged into the family laptop when he was asleep, scrolling through pictures and emails I had already saved and categorizing them. Each piece moved me closer to liberation. I even contacted a family lawyer named David, who came highly recommended. "Mr. David, I need to discuss filing for divorce." "Urgently," I spoke into the phone, my voice firm. "Of course, we can move quickly. Bring all your evidence," David replied. The next step was to prepare for the confrontation that would end this charade. I set another meeting with Julie to discuss my digital marketing skills. I needed to reclaim my old self amidst the ruins Jacob left behind. Jacob had cornered me for too long. Soon, he'd face the consequences of underestimating me. I wasn't just a passive player in his game anymore. I was setting the rules now. Jacob left for another one of his business trips, his departure cloaked in the same stale excuses. This time, I didn't watch him leave. I was already halfway out the door, en route to meet David, my lawyer. "Good morning, Mrs. Connors," David greeted, extending his hand. "Please, take a seat." "Call me Lauren. Mrs. Connors won't exist soon," I replied, shaking his hand firmly. David nodded, understanding the weight of my words. "What do you have for me?" I handed him a neatly organized folder filled with the evidence I had gathered. Emails, photos, and messages. Proof of his affair with a woman named Emma, I explained. David looked through the documents, his face hardening. "This is more than enough. We can file for divorce and seek a substantial settlement. Are you prepared for Jacob's reaction?" "Absolutely," I said, my voice steady. "I've spent years under his thumb. It's time he felt the consequences." "Good. We'll also work on securing living arrangements and support. You mentioned you were reviving your digital marketing career?" "Yes," I confirmed. "I've started reconnecting with old contacts and updating my skills." "Perfect. This will show the court your efforts to rebuild your life independently," David noted, jotting down some details. "Let's get started on the paperwork." Later that day, I met Julie at a co-working space. We settled into a corner, our laptops open in front of us. "How did the meeting with David go?" Julie asked, her eyes scanning me for any sign of hesitation. "It went well. He's confident we can file for divorce and secure a good settlement," I replied, feeling a flicker of hope. Julie smiled warmly. "That's great news. Now, let's get you back on track with digital marketing. I've got a few clients interested in consultations." We spent the afternoon working together, diving into strategies and business plans. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was re-engaging with my passion, feeling the rust start to fall away. By the time Jacob arrived home late Sunday night, I was ready. My plan was set, evidence secure, and my own path clear. Monday morning, Jacob swaggered into the kitchen, his usual smirk in place. "Morning," he said, grabbing a coffee mug. "Morning," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "I need to talk to you tonight." He looked up, curiosity flickering in his eyes. "Sounds serious. What about?" "You'll find out," I said, turning my attention back to my laptop. As the day turned into evening, Jacob's impatience grew. "Lauren, just tell me what's going on," he demanded during dinner. I finally looked at him, my gaze unwavering. After dinner? In the living room. He grumbled but nodded, shoveling the last of his meal into his mouth. Once we were both seated, I handed him the folder. What's this? He asked, flipping it open. Proof of your affair with Emma, I said calmly. Jacob's face paled, then flushed with anger. You've been spying on me? I have evidence, Jacob, and I've already filed for divorce, I stated, my voice steady. You think you can leave? I'll take everything from you, he roared, slamming the folder shut. You'll try, I said, my resolve unshaken, but David assures me that won't happen. For a moment, Jacob sat there, stunned. Then he sneered. This isn't over, Lauren. No, I agreed. This is just the beginning. I rose and walked away, his threats chasing me but falling on deaf ears. I'd taken the first step and there was no turning back. I stood tall in the living room, armed with the evidence and sheer willpower. Jacob's face was an intense canvas of fury and fear. Seeing him like this, knowing the grip he once held was slipping, gave me a strange sense of strength. Lauren, you seriously think this will end well for you? Jacob sneered, slamming the folder on the table. You don't have the guts. I met his glare head on. I already filed the papers. You're not going to bully me this time. Jacob laughed, a harsh, hollow sound. You're delusional. Without me, you're nothing. His voice dripped with contempt. I've already lined up clients and networked with old contacts in digital marketing, I declared, keeping my voice steady. I'm not afraid of starting over. His sneer faltered just a bit, but he quickly regained his composure. You think you can just waltz out and thrive? Dream on, Lauren. I'll make sure you get nothing. I shook my head, a slight smile forming. David assures me that's not how it works, and I have all the proof of your affair. The courts will see that. Jacob's arrogance crumbled into rage. He moved closer, almost spitting his words. This isn't over. I'll fight you every step of the way. You can try, I said calmly, standing my ground, but I'm done living in fear. You don't control me anymore. Jacob's eyes darkened, and for a moment he looked like he might lunge at me. Instead, he turned abruptly, storming out of the house. The door slammed behind him, leaving a silence that felt both eerie and liberating. I sank into the couch, my heart pounding but relief flooding through me. This was the beginning of the end of Jacob's tyranny. The next few days were a whirlwind of legal meetings and planning. I met with David again to finalize details and ensure all my bases were covered. He was confident about our case, reassuring me that Jacob's threats held no real weight. You're doing the right thing, Lauren, he said, handing me the final copies of our paperwork. Don't let him intimidate you. By the weekend, I'd signed a lease on a new apartment. It was modest, but felt like a palace compared to Jacob's oppressive domain. I started moving small things first, careful not to leave too many traces at once. I spent time with Julie, brainstorming and rehashing old digital marketing tricks and techniques. She was a rock, her support a constant reminder that I wasn't alone in this fight. One evening, as I packed more belongings into boxes, Jacob barged in, his face a mask of controlled rage. Where do you think you're going? He demanded. I'm leaving, Jacob, I replied simply, taping the top of a box. Don't think you'll get away with this, he growled. You'll come crawling back. I leveled my gaze at him. No, Jacob, I will never come back. Your reign is over. He stared at me, threats bubbling beneath the surface. This isn't over, Lauren. And it never will be, I said, lifting the box and walking past him with a heart that finally felt free. I closed the door to my new apartment, exhaling a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The space was small, but it felt expansive compared to the emotional prison I had escaped. Boxes were piled in the corner, waiting to be unpacked, but right now, I just needed to savor this moment of freedom. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It was a text from Julie. How's the new place? Need any help? I quickly replied, It's great, finally free. Thanks for everything, Julie. As I was sorting through the boxes, my phone buzzed again, this time a call from Jacob. I hesitated but answered, bracing myself. Lauren, his voice was icy. You think you can just walk away? I'm not walking away, Jacob. I'm running, and you can't stop me, I replied, keeping my voice firm. You'll regret this, Lauren, mark my words. His threat lingered in the air before he hung up abruptly. I sat down, feeling a mix of anxiety and relief. Just as I was getting overwhelmed, my phone buzzed again. This time it was an email alert. Opening my phone, I saw it was from Emma. The subject line read, A Truth You Should Know. Curiosity piqued. I opened the email. Emma had sent a detailed account of Jacob's manipulative tactics, admitting how he deceived her as well, making her think they had a future together. She included screenshots, messages, and even financial inconsistencies that painted a clearer picture of Jacob's deceit. I forwarded everything to David, adding a brief note, more fuel for the fire. My phone chimed again. Julie was calling. "Hey, everything okay?" "Mostly," I replied, rubbing my forehead. "Jacob called, and it was nasty, but Emma sent me more evidence. She's backing me up on this." "That's incredible." Julie's enthusiasm was contagious. "See? Things are falling into place. Jacob doesn't stand a chance." "I hope you're right," I said, my resolve strengthening. The next few weeks were a flurry of activity. I immersed myself in work, meeting with new clients and consulting on their digital marketing needs. Every success felt like a small victory, a brick laid on the path to rebuilding my life. Jacob, meanwhile, tried to intimidate and manipulate me, making sporadic, hostile visits to my apartment. Each time, I stood my ground. "You think you'll make it on your own?" he sneered during one encounter, standing in my doorway. "I'm already doing just fine, thank you," I shot back, holding the door firmly. His attempts to control me only made me stronger. With each passing day, I felt more empowered, more capable of tackling whatever came my way. I sat in a client meeting one afternoon when an email from David popped up. "Jacob's financials look precarious. His company's shares are plummeting. He's losing ground fast." The wave of satisfaction that washed over me was undeniable. Jacob's empire was crumbling, just like his hold over me. I knew I had to stay focused, keep pushing forward. After the meeting, I called Julie to share the news. "Jacob's falling apart," I said, barely able to keep the triumph out of my voice. "Good. He deserves every bit of it," Julie replied. "Keep going, Lauren. You're almost there." As I walked back to my new home, the city lights casting a warm glow over the streets, I felt an overwhelming sense of liberation. Jacob had underestimated me, and now he was paying the price. This war was far from over, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was winning. I stood by the window in my new apartment, watching the rain tap rhythmically against the glass. It was almost poetic, a cleansing of sorts. Jacob's grip on my life was weaker than ever, and his threats seemed empty now. My phone buzzed. It was David. "Lauren, I've got news," he said, excitement in his voice. "What is it?" I asked, hope bubbling inside me. Emma finally cooperated fully. She leaked Jacob's private dealings, and the fallout has been significant. His company is spiraling, and he's facing multiple lawsuits, David explained. My heart leapt with joy. "Thank you, David, for everything." "Just doing my job. You've done the hard part," he replied. After hanging up, I immediately called Julie. "It's happening, Julie. Jacob's empire is collapsing." "That's amazing," she exclaimed. "You should feel so proud, Lauren." "I do," I said, feeling a sense of justice for the first time in years. Later that evening, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find Jacob, looking disheveled and defeated. His pricey suit was wrinkled, and his eyes held a frantic desperation. "Lauren, you have to help me," he implored, stepping inside without invitation. "I don't have to do anything, Jacob," I replied coldly. "Please," he continued, voice breaking. "Emma betrayed me. She ruined everything. I need your support." I crossed my arms, maintaining my composure. "You think after all the hell you've put me through, I'd ever help you again? I made mistakes, but we were partners once. You owe me." His voice rose, anger seeping back in. "I owe you nothing. You destroyed our marriage, belittled me, and treated me like property," I shot back. "You're facing the consequences of your own actions." Jacob's desperation morphed into rage. "You'll come crawling back to me. It's a cold world out there, Lauren." "No, Jacob. It's liberating. I'm thriving without you," I said, stepping back to the door, effectively dismissing him. He gave me a long, hard stare, then turned and left, the door closing behind him with finality. I felt relief wash over me. His chapter in my life was truly over. Over the next few weeks, I focused on my consultancy work, clients praising my ideas and insights. One evening, while packing up my computer after a successful week, I received another message from David. Jacob was facing serious financial ruin and public disgrace. His empire was collapsing faster than anyone anticipated. Julie and I celebrated over dinner, each toast a reminder of the hurdles I had overcome. "You've shown incredible strength, Lauren," Julie said, raising her glass. I couldn't have done it without friends like you, I replied, feeling gratitude swell in my chest. As I walked back to my apartment that night, I reflected on how far I had come. No longer the shadow of a woman crushed by Jacob's tyranny, but someone building her own life, on her own terms. Sitting by the window, I sipped my tea, thinking back to the beginning of this journey. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. The storm had passed, and I had emerged stronger. The next morning, I dove back into my work, fully embracing my new life. Jacob's downfall was a reminder that karma had a way of catching up, and now nothing but clear skies lay ahead.